Once you have a keen interest in reading about research, origin and the spread of diseases, including Ebola, it will give you a vivid comprehensive understanding to how the world is in the hands of dangerous world leaders and a bunch of hardened criminals. Even though African leaders are powerless, they shouldn't forget that Africa is a developing continent. We still have a long way to go despite the resources. Therefore, the need to save the continent, the economy, and the people is necessary. Europe and America economies are good, they have plenty to eat, with tons of food wasted every year, but millions of Africans struggle to eat. So why African leaders dare to speak against the destruction of the African continent, while they toil fruitlessly? On our blog Secrets of HIV/AIDS and Ebola Facts Journal, we have published articles of Dutch scientist Johan van Dongen, German doctor, Wolf Geisler, American health writer, Janet C. Fallon, Japanese health writer, Yoichi Shimatsu, and another American medical writer, Susan Posel, all revealing shocking articles that the US government is responsible for a series of biological weapons, including Ebola in Africa. I am now adding another research from a Bulgarian journalist, Ilyana Gatangieva, previously known for films about the war in Syria. She has published a new investigation, revealing that the US Army still produces deadly viruses, bacteria, and poisons in violation of UN conventions. Her article was suppressed because it reveals too much. According to her, Pentagon documents reveal shocking facts about the military program of biological experiments by the United States and around the world, reports Bulgarian website bgr.newsfront.info. Military scientists under diplomatic cover are testing artificially created viruses in Pentagon laboratories in 25 countries and systematically spreading disease, with Congo suffering from Ebola. The U.S. biological weapon laboratories are funded by the DTRA military agency, a program with a budget of $2.1 billion. The countries of the former USSR, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, and Africa participate in it. Georgia, Zone of Biological Weapons. The center of Lugar is located 17 kilometers from the Vazhny U.S. Air Force Base in the suburbs of Tbilisi. The military program here is carried out by biologists of the U.S. Military Medical Group in Georgia and private contractors under a federal contract with DTRA. A biological laboratory with a third degree of biosecurity is available only to U.S. citizens who have access to classified information. They have diplomatic immunity granted to them in the framework of the Intergovernmental Agreement on Defense Cooperation with Georgia. The agreement between the United States and Georgia gives diplomatic status to U.S. military and civilian personnel working on the program. According to the U.S. Federal Register, activities in the center of Lugar include the study of biological agents, viral diseases, and obtaining biological material for future experiments. Private companies under diplomatic coverage. The performers of military programs DTRA, private companies. They do not report directly to Congress and may bypass the law due to the lack of direct observation. Civilian personnel also have diplomatic immunity, although these people are not diplomats. Consequently, private companies can operate on behalf of the U.S. government under diplomatic cover without direct control from the host state, Georgia. This practice is often used by the CIA for undercover agents. 3 private American companies operate in the center of Lugar: CH2M Hill, Battelle, and Metabiota. With the exception of the Pentagon, they manage federal projects related to biological research, the CIA and other government agencies. CH2M Hill has a contract with DTRA for $341.5 million under the Pentagon Program for Biological Laboratories in Georgia, Uganda, Tanzania, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Southeast Asia. Half of this amount falls on a contract with the center of Lugar in Georgia. According to CH2M Hill's presentation of the project, the American company provides storage of biological agents in the Lugar Center, where it works with specialists involved in the production of biological weapons in the past. Battelle is a $59 million contract subcontractor. The company has experience working with biological agents since it has already worked on the U.S. Arms program for 11 U.S. Army contracts in the past. Battelle works in Pentagon biolabs in Afghanistan, Armenia, Georgia, Uganda, Tanzania, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Vietnam. The company conducts research and testing using extremely toxic chemicals and pathogenic bioactive substances for a wide range of U.S. government agencies. Battelle has government purchases of $2 billion and is ranked 23rd on the list of the 100 best U.S. contractors. The CIA Clear Vision Operation. Operation Clear Vision was developed jointly with the CIA and Battelle to establish Soviet anthrax strains from the countries of the former USSR. The secret operation of the CIA and Battelle was omitted in the statements of the United States and the United Nations, which must be supported by countries that have acceded to the international treaty. Top secret experiments. For the past decade, Battelle operates the highest biology lab in Fort Detrick, Maryland, under contract with the Department of Homeland Security. The company has signed two 10-year federal contracts for $344.4 million, 2006 to 2016, and $19.9 million. Some of the secret experiments conducted by Battelle at Thenbach include, evaluating dust spray technologies, evaluation of the dangerous effects of toxins and aerosols, evaluation of the virulence of B. pseudomalia in primates. Melioidosis has the potential to create biological weapons. The bacterium is classified as a Category B biological agent and has been studied in the past by the United States as a possible biological weapon. In addition to military experiments in the center of Lugar, Georgia, Battelle produces bioactive substances in a secret biology lab in Fort Detrick, USA. According to the NCCA documents, the biological laboratory performs genetic engineering of pathogens and assessment of their potential as agents of bioterrorism, new non-traditional ways of infection with such agents, erosion tests with primates. Biologists create genetically modified pathogens in Fort Detrick. Pentagon biolabs in the epicenter of the Ebola epidemic. The American company Metabiota Incorporated received $18.4 million for the DTRA program in Georgia and Ukraine for scientific and technical advisory services. In its official online profile, the company offers its clients the following consulting services: on-site research of biological threats, discoveries of pathogens, epidemic response and clinical trials. Metabiota Incorporated was hired by the Pentagon under the DTRA project before and during the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. The company received $3.1 million for work in Sierra Leone, one of the countries most affected by the Ebola virus infection. Metabiota is working on a Pentagon project at the epicenter of the Ebola outbreak, where 3 of the U.S. military labs are located. The report of the doctors dated July 17, 2014, accuses Metabiota Incorporated in the cultivation of blood cells in the laboratory of Sierra Leone and the wrong diagnosis of healthy patients, whom the company diagnosed as sick. The company officially denies these allegations. Military experiments with biting insects. Entomological warfare is a type of biological warfare in which insects are used to spread infectious diseases. Documents from the program in Georgia show that the Pentagon performs such tests on insects. In 2014, the center of Lugar was equipped with a special plant for breeding insects. So began the Project Sandfly in Georgia and the Caucasus. The project also covers the territory outside of Georgia, the Russian Caucasus. In 2014 to 2015, sandflies of species of phlebotomins were studied in the framework of another project, Activities for the Surveillance of Acute Fever. Since 2015, residents of Tbilisi have begun to notice more and more flies flying in the bathrooms. The same type of flies predominantly lives indoors and can be seen throughout the year in Georgia, regardless of the season. Witnesses say that flies appeared in their baths, and they bite them while swimming. Since the start of the Feds project in Georgia and the Caucasus in 2014, the same insects as in Georgia have attacked neighboring Dagestan. According to local residents, they cause a rash on the skin after bites, live in sewers and appear in the baths. Phlebotomine flies carry dangerous parasites in the saliva and transfer them when they bite into human blood. The disease they cause is of great interest to the Pentagon. In 2003, during the war in Iraq, American soldiers were attacked and bitterly bitten by sandflies, infected with leishmaniasis. The disease is common in Iraq and Afghanistan. If left untreated, the acute form of the disease is fatal. A report by the American Army entitled Arthropods of Medical Significance in Asia and the European part of the USSR lists all species of local insects, their habitats and diseases that they suffer. The bites of flies that live in the collectors are also mentioned in the document. White coat operation: infected flies infect volunteers with fever. According to the declassified reports of the American Army in 1970 and 1972, experiments with the fever caused by the bites of flies were conducted with volunteers in the operation of White Coat. Although the American Biological Weapons Program was officially discontinued in 1969, in 1982 the USAM riot conducted an experiment. Sandflies and mosquitoes can be carriers of diseases, dengue fever, chikungunya, oriental encephalitis of horses, etc. Pentagon: how to kill 625,000 people, for only 29 cents each. The 1981 report compares two scenarios: 16 simultaneous attacks on the city by mosquito-like mites of type A aegypti and aerosol attacks with a spraying of tularemia pathogens, as well as an assessment of their economic efficiency and the number of victims. Operation Big Itch, field trials with Xenosiliciopus tropical flea species were made to assess the suitability of these insects in biological warfare. 1 million mosquitoes of A. aegypti were raised in the laboratory. 1/3 of them were placed in ammunition and dropped from a plane or scattered from the ground. Mosquitoes survived the descent from the plane and began to look for blood from people after landing. Mosquitoes were also originally spread from the ground during an experiment in the state of Georgia, USA. Parts of the report, such as the Aedes aegypti mass dilution, are not declassified, which means that the operation is still ongoing. Aedes aegypti is a carrier of diseases such as dengue fever, chikungunya and Zika. These types of mosquitoes and fleas are studied and collected for research and testing at the Lugar Center in Georgia. The tropical mosquito of the species Aedes albopictus was first discovered in Georgia in 2014, as was the mosquito of the species Aedes aegypti. Both types of mosquitoes are carriers of yellow fever, acute tropical fever, chikungunya, and Zika. With the exception of western Georgia, the Aedes albopictus mosquito, according to the European Center for Disease Control and Prevention, is also recorded in neighboring regions of Russia and northern Turkey. Their distribution is not characteristic of these places. Anthrax epidemic in Georgia and human clinical trials. In 2007, Georgia suspended compulsory annual vaccination against anthrax for pets. As a result, an epidemic broke out, and the incidence rate peaked in 2013. This year, NATO launched clinical trials with people on the new anthrax vaccine in the center of Lugar. Pentagon studies Russian anthrax. Anthrax has already been used in bioterrorism, although in the past it was developed as a weapon for the U.S. Army. Despite the Pentagon's claim that the current program is only defensive, the facts point to the opposite. In 2016, American scientists in the center of Lugar conducted a study on the genomic sequence of the Russian bacillus of the Siberian vaccine strain 55 funded by the DTRA program in Tbilisi under the leadership of Metabiota. In Georgia, 34 people are infected with Congo-Crimean hemorrhagic fever. Crimean hemorrhagic fever is caused by a virus. In 2014, 34 people were diagnosed with this disease, 3 died, and an outbreak was noted. At the same time, Pentagon biologists are studying a virus in Georgia. The DTRA developed epidemiology of fever diseases caused by dengue and other arboviruses in Georgia. The project includes testing patients with fever symptoms and collecting ticks for laboratory analysis as possible carriers of hemorrhagic fever. The source of the epidemic remains unknown to this day. According to a report from the Department of Veterinary Medicine in Georgia, only one type of all ticks collected in villages where an epidemic is occurring is positive for a dangerous virus. Despite claims by local authorities that the virus spreads to animals, all blood samples of animals turn out to be negative. The absence of infected ticks in animals is inexplicable, given the sharp rise in the disease in humans, which means that the virus spreads more artificially than naturally. Military Biological Laboratory at the epicenter of the deadly epidemic in Afghanistan. 237 cases of Congo-Crimean hemorrhagic fever, 41 of which were fatal, were observed in Afghanistan in December 2017. According to the Ministry of Health of Afghanistan, the majority of infections occur in the capital Kabul and Herat province on the border with Iran. Afghanistan is one of the 25 countries in the world on whose territory the Pentagon's biolab is located. The project in Afghanistan is part of the US DTRA-funded BET. Companies hired by the program in Afghanistan also operate in the center of Lugar in Georgia, CH2M Hill and Battelle. CH2M Hill has a contract for $10,400,000. Contractors in Georgia and Afghanistan are the same as the diseases that spread to the local population. Why does the Pentagon collect and study bats? Bats are believed to be the source of the spread of Ebola, Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome and other lethal diseases. However, how these viruses reach people is not yet known. DTRA has a number of projects for the study of military pathogens on bats as part of the Joint Biological Cooperation Program. Genetic virus engineering is legal in the United States. MERS-CoV is considered to be a virus that comes from bats and spreads directly among people or jumps at camels, and then at people. However, as with the Ebola virus, the exact methods of infection are not yet known to them. According to WHO data, by June 2017, 80,000 cases of the disease were registered worldwide, 699 of which are fatal, in 15 countries. The mortality rate from MERS is 40%. WHO MERS-CoV is one of the viruses that have been genetically modified in the United States and studied in the Pentagon. Evidence of this is President Obama's temporary ban on state funding for MERS-related projects in the field of genetic engineering in 2014, as well as influenza and SARS. In 2017, the moratorium was lifted and scientific experiments continued. They are aimed at increasing the infectivity and potency of pathogens. Such dual-use experiments are illegal in the United States. Tularemia is a biological weapon. Tularemia, also known as rabbit fever, has been classified as a bioterrorism agent and has been studied in the past by the U.S. military. However, the interest of the Pentagon to this disease and its carriers, mites and rodents, continues to this day. DTRA is conducting a series of tularemia studies in Georgia. Extremely dangerous pathogens pose a serious threat to public health and can become biological weapons. Pentagon biodocuments and diseases in Ukraine. DTRA funded 11 biolaboratories in the former Soviet Republic. Ukraine has no control over military biological laboratories on its territory. By agreement between the U.S. Department of Defense and the Ministry of Health of Ukraine, signed in 2005, the government of Ukraine has no right to publicly disclose confidential information under the American program. Ukraine is committed to submitting pathogens to the U.S. Department of Defense for biological research. The Pentagon has access to state secrets of Ukraine. Among the number of agreements between the United States and Ukraine is the creation of a science and technology center in Ukraine. The international organization is funded primarily by the American government. It will be given diplomatic status. The STCU officially funds the projects of scientists who worked on the Soviet biological weapons program. Over the past 20 years, the center has invested $285 million in 1,850 projects of scientists involved in the production of weapons of mass destruction in the past. 364 deaths from swine flu in Ukraine. One of the Pentagon biolabs is located in Kharkov, where in January 2016, 20 Ukrainian soldiers died from the swine flu in just 2 days, and another 200 were hospitalized. The government of Ukraine does not report the causes of death. By March of the same year, 364 people died from the flu in Ukraine PDM09, a strain causing the 2009 swine flu pandemic. Police are investigating an infection of indigestible disease. Hepatitis A has caused an inexplicable epidemic in southeastern Ukraine over the past few months, where most Pentagon biolabs are located. 3 years ago, more than 100 people in one city became infected with cholera. It is assumed that both epidemics are caused by contaminated drinking water. 60 people with hepatitis A were hospitalized in Zaporizhia in the summer of 2017. The cause of the infection remains unknown. In the Odessa region, 19 children from an orphanage were hospitalized due to an infectious disease in June 2017. 29 cases of hepatitis A were reported in Kharkiv in November of the same year. The virus was found in contaminated drinking water.